It doesn't matter what kind of e-commerce brand you're building, you still need a rock-solid way to grow and scale your company like clockwork. Welcome to 7 Figures and Beyond, an e-commerce marketing podcast for D2C brand owners and marketers looking for best practices that include proven strategies and tactics to grow an e-commerce brand to 7 figures and beyond. Bringing 18 plus years of marketing experience as an e-commerce brand owner and e-commerce agency owner, please welcome your host, Greg Shuey.
Hey everyone, welcome to the 7 Figures and Beyond e-commerce marketing podcast. I hope that everyone is absolutely crushing it today. My guest today is Martin McAndrew. He is the director of Bluethirst, a performance digital marketing agency based in the UK. Martin's been in the digital space for 18 years, about as long as I've been in. So it's been a minute, right?
I think that's why my wrinkles and furrow lines are deeper than yours, mate.
That's awesome. And he's an expert paid search marketer. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. So we're going to dive into Performance Max, also referred to as PMax. And for many marketers, those that we work with, as well as those who I'm talking to on a regular basis, they don't understand PMax. They think that it's this black box where you add some inputs and they're not quite sure what's going on behind the scenes or how to optimize it, how to improve it, and they just set it and forget it, right? So I'm hoping that when we come out of this episode that we are really going to have shred this mindset and give you a roadmap on how to properly set it up, how to optimize it, and then most importantly, how to scale traffic and revenue through this channel. So it's going to be a great discussion today. Martin, thank you so much for being with us.
Oh, thank you for having me, mate.
Yeah. So before we jump into our conversation, would you just take a few minutes and introduce yourself to our listeners and share a little bit about your personal story and how you've gotten to where you are today? And this is my favorite part of the episode, honestly.
So I actually my introduction to digital started in my final year of university. So I actually trained as an engineer, as a marine surveyor, and I worked as a kind of summer and evening jobs as a yacht broker. When I say yacht broker, I was the guy that used to wash the boats when the yacht broker was trying to sell them. And in the UK, it gets frigging cold in the winter, and
Sure.
You don't want to be the guy outside with the hose pipe washing the boats in the middle of the winter. So I heard on the line that there was potential for a new website build, and this was kind of back in the day before CRMs and CMSs and all that kind of cool stuff.
Straight HTML.
Straight HTML, yeah, it was phenomenal, and it was an opportunity to get out of the cold winter and stay in the office during the winter. So I put my hand up. We managed to, it was a cool little system. So back in the day, we were selling anything up to kind of 150-foot boats across Europe.
Wow.
And generally, these guys who want these big boats want a big mooring, and they also probably want a house nearby. So this system, all this stuff's always for sale if the price is right. So what you can do, someone came in looking for something, you'd list what they've currently got, and then a couple of months later, someone would be looking for something like that, and the whole system tied it together, as well as being, the equivalent of like a headless website, so it would plug into different things. It was, that was my first foray into digital, and that was 20 years ago, something like that.
Man. Yeah. We're the old boys.
Yeah. And then 14 years ago, formed Bluethirst, and I've never really looked back. And exactly what you said. Digital marketing, anything, normally the paid media side of things. We've done a lot of SEO, back in the day, but we're predominantly paid media now across Google, Meta, TikTok, Pinterest, that portfolio of products, really. So in a nutshell, that's my history.
I love it. Yachts. That's wild.
Well, we're an island, man. We're an island over here. We've got to find some way to get off every so often.
Fair enough. Nice. Okay, so let's jump in. So before we get kind of into the meat of our conversation, can you give us just a really quick crash course on what PMax is and how it's different than like a traditional search campaign or display campaign. Break this down.
Yeah, so there's two kind of schools of thought on PMax. There's the kind of the pro Googlers and there's the kind of anti kind of Googlers. So
Yeah.
the way that Google sells it is it's a great way to access their entire portfolio. So it's YouTube, it's Google Display Network, it's Discover, it's Gmail ads, it's Maps, and it can all be driven by a cost per acquisition, a return on investment type bidding strategy. Then there's the kind of naysayers who are, it's a black box that everyone should be scared of and it's Google taking over the world. But the reality, it's kind of in the middle. And some days I lean a bit more that way and some days I lean a bit more that way. But it's ultimately the way it's all going. And it's kind of the sort, we're even seeing it in Meta and we're seeing it in TikTok.
Right.
It's the same approach. And I don't think PPCs need to be worried about their jobs because actually there's quite a lot you can do within PMax and actually you become more valuable by having a more technical understanding of how all this stuff works rather than, going through a CSV file of search queries and picking out the bad ones, which is what everyone seems to be worried that they're not going to be able to do anymore. Right.
Yeah, I like that. I like that you mentioned they don't have to be worried because there is so much that you can do inside of PMax.
Exactly.
The one comment that rubs me wrong is when I'm talking to a prospect and they're like, "Oh, isn't that just all automated? You just set it and forget it." I'm like, "Oh my goodness!"
Yeah.
Like, and unfortunately, a lot of marketers and businesses think that is the case, and so let's debunk that. Let's jump in. So, someone who's brand new to PMax, when they're trying to figure out how they should approach this, like, what are some of those key elements that these marketers should prioritize when they're starting to set up that PMax campaign for the first time?
Yeah. So the first thing is this is a generated type of campaign. So it will only work as well as the data you give it. So the mindset you need to go into it is with a data mindset. If you just want to set something up and leave it, it ain't going to work. So
you may get lucky. You may get lucky, but probably not.
You'll probably spend a shed load of cash, become one of the naysayers against PMax and be worried it's going to take your job. But actually, if you go down the other route of kind of looking at the three different bits of data that PMax really need, is the first one, it's super important to set the goals. What is it you actually want the campaigns to do? And you need to start thinking about minimum numbers as well. So realistically, you're probably needing 50 to 100 of these goals to complete every kind of month to allow the system to work. So if you've got a very, very small budget or you're using, if you've got a funnel and you're right at the very bottom of the funnel, you've got to make sure that you're giving 50 to 100 conversion signals back up for the system to run.
So per month.
Yeah.
Okay.
There are some documentation that say you can get away with 30, but I would set 50 to 100 is kind of a nice safe bet that you're giving the algorithm enough data that it can get kind of near statistical significance on the decisions it has to make. If you're going to give it a month work and give one conversion and it can try and work out what to do from one conversion, not even the greatest PPC mind could do that, not to mention a computer program that's got to go and do it algorithmically. So work out what your goals are. And then that kind of leads on to the second bit, which is understanding the conversion and the way you're reporting that goal. So if it's an e-commerce type campaign, so ROAS, return on ad spend, is the important metric. Do you understand the revenue figure that you're giving back to the channel? Does it include delivery? Does it include tax? Are you removing stuff for refunds? If you want a 4 times ROAS and you're not giving it the correct ROAS figure for it to do its algorithmic calculations with, the system's going to fail. So you need to understand the data that you're giving to the tool before you give it to the tool and then tell it off for not doing the right thing. And then finally is the kind of the audience bit, which is really the nut and bolts of how all this stuff works. So we used to have fairly good audience data where you could see people that are looking for this type of product or this sort of subset. Especially in the kind of Europe, we've got laws now against for digital privacy, which don't get me started, but a load of rubbish. we need to kind of work within these laws.
Yeah.
And actually, what you really need to be doing is taking the people that do what you want them to do and passing that back into the system. So first-party data, give the algorithm the people that did what you wanted and say, go and find me more people like these people that did what I wanted. And, you know, it's a little bit scary what Google knows about you. And it can go, well, you know, this person that did this had all of these data points. Here's a whole load of other people with the same data points. And that's kind of effectively how the algorithm uses audience data. So, yeah, that's it. It sounds simple, but if that's the most important of any PMax campaign, is just getting that data that would allow the algorithm to work.
Yeah.
Correct.
And part of that data, I assume, would be making sure that Shopify is connected and that you've got the right, things set up that connect back and forth to pass that data to Klaviyo, making sure that we've got all of our platforms and data flowing properly.
Yeah, integrated and correct. And it's always worth taking kind of raw snippets of that data and double checking what's being passed across. We've found a few kind of little glitches where things haven't synced up right. And just because it looks like it's working doesn't always mean it is. But getting that set up and getting that data flowing and getting that first party data and understanding what that first party data is, that's the core of getting PMax to work. If you can't get that right, you're not going to get success because it needs those signals and it needs that data in order to operate.
Yeah. So just kind of a follow-up question there. If you struggle on the data side, you should just either not do paid search or like you should just do search ads. Like, what are your thoughts about that?
I mean, if you're not able to get that data, I think you're going to struggle to do business.
Period. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Because even with, there are some great tools out there at the moment that use AI to interpret big data sets. And the kind of mindset we're going into with all of our clients now is, if you can record it in a database, because in 6 months' time, we could look at that and we could find some insight in there and we could plumb that in as a first-party data source or as a signal or a tool. So I think outside search, getting your data correct across a business has got to be one of the biggest priorities.
Absolutely critical.
Yeah.
Cool. So I know you just briefly touched on audience and being able to target, based on interests and those types of things. So, once they've got data flowing, data set up properly, how should marketers approach audience signals in PMax campaigns? And I would assume a lot of people who are listening to this might not even know what audience signals are. So maybe you could break that down for us. But how should they approach that? What are the most effective ways to layer in signals to really guide that machine learning?
Yeah. So kind of at the top level, you've got the audience data in the platform. So that's things like your demographic data, your interest in data. That everyone has access to that. So for me, that's the weakest source of data.
Yeah.
So that's where you'd kind of start. You'd go broad. You get people that are interested in the topic. You'd then start to overlay that with remarketing data. So you could use the Google Ads tag and say, I want people similar to the tag. But ultimately, where you want to get to is your CRM and your first-party data. So if you're using Salesforce or Shopify, it's the people that have actually made the purchase you're passing back. None of your competitors have got that because they haven't got your data lists.
Right.
So that's where the real value that everyone else has got the same tools to work with, but not everyone's got the same data. And that's where the data, again, going back to my kind of first point, it's the data that's the important bit. The data is where all the value in everything you do going forward is going to be. Everyone's got access to the top level, but you can really get ahead by, it's that 50 to 100 conversions. If you've got better 50 to 100 conversions than your competitors, you're going to get better performance.
You're going to win. Yeah.
Exactly.
Got it. I know that, you mentioned at the beginning is that PMax has a lot of different things working inside of it. So, it can deliver search ads for you, shopping ads, display, remarketing. So one of the things that's new-ish for some brand owners and marketers is the idea of we need to put creative into the system.
Yeah.
So typically that's just been like a Facebook, a meta ads type thing. So in your opinion, how critical is creative going into PMax, especially high quality? And then what type of assets are you seeing perform best in platform?
Yeah, great question. So we started when PMax first came out with taking our best performing creative from a Meta campaign and dropping that into a PMax campaign. When PMax first came out, you weren't able to see individual asset performance.
Right.
Then they released it through the API. Now you can actually see it in the interface. So what we've started to do is migrate from using the best Meta video creative and actually making our separate own A/B testing plan with it within Google. Generally what works on Meta tends to work in Google because they're kind of similar placements. And what the system's trying to do is align people at the top of the funnel with kind of the branding type message at the bottom, and then changing that creative asset as they become further down the funnel and go different buying stages into, ultimately what everyone complains about is brand at the bottom. But yeah, that's how people search. They've got a problem. Yep. They get introduced to something and then they flow through the system, and most of your people will convert on your brand term. But actually, you've got to look at it as an overall investment, an overall return. And does using PMax and investing in Google as a strategy have a positive ROI overall, rather than just kind of super focusing on brands and, how much am I losing to brand, and, can I get brand for free? That's kind of not the way it works anymore. If you restrict PMax from brands, you're saying, well, I want a 5 times ROAS, but I'm not going to allow you any of the revenue from people that generally convert on that final step. So the system will go, oh, okay, well, I now can't accommodate that into my algorithm, so I'm now going to have to make the top of your funnel a lot smaller to hit the same ROAS target. So you've kind of, even though I hate to say it, you've got to trust Google a little bit. Something I thought I would never say, but yeah, you've got to trust them a little bit.
I'm going to make up a graphic with just your face and that quote. You've got to trust Google a little bit.
Yeah, trust it with lots of testing. There we go. There's the caveats.
And that will go viral. You've got to trust Google a little bit. So what's working the best right now? Videos, images, is it a blend of the two?
So what is great is to give the system as much creative as possible. If you've got stuff that's worked on other channels, put it into the system. There are asset reports that you can see if they're being served. There's a nice little hack, and what you can find, and it's by tweaking your CPA targeting. If you've got a relatively tight CPA, you'll find that a lot of stuff tends to come in through your search ads, through your PLA ads. If you start tweaking the cost per acquisition target up, you'll then start to notice Google may be selling your ad space into stuff that's not going to work quite so well. So that's where your CPA's kind of over-egged a little bit, and you can take that back and you can start removing. So it's just a game of playing with that ROAS or CPA targeting, seeing which placements are being used. And that's quite a nice little signal that, if you say to Google, right, I'll pay you £10 for every lead, well, it's going to go out, and it might be able to get them for £6 per lead, but it's going to put another £4 into AdWords, because why wouldn't you? You're a company. So you can tweak and you can play with that, and you can look at where the placements are. You've just got to be a little bit mindful that very few people are going to watch a YouTube video and go, oh yeah, I'll buy that and buy that in that same session. So you need to give it a little bit of time. You need to allow it to kind of track, find the right people. But, over a period of time, every asset should be a sales guy. And if a salesman's not selling, cut them and put something else in new. But yeah, you just got to, it's that kind of mindset of, if it's top of funnel and it's brand awareness, well, then don't expect it to be producing sales, because its job isn't. Its job is to make people start searching for your brand name and then come and make purchases. So, you've just got to be realistic a little bit with the data.
Yeah, absolutely. We see this with PMax. We see this with Meta as well, as when, you're spending, driving traffic, driving conversions, driving revenue, and then you start to plateau. Yeah. Right? And at that point, you've got to figure out how to start building efficiencies so that you can start then, getting off of that plateau. So as you have encountered this, Like, what are some of those effective strategies that help you optimize and kind of take that next step off of the plateau?
Yeah, so there's a couple of bits that we'll generally do in that instance. My kind of favorite at the moment is giving the algorithm supplemental data with secondary conversion events. So
Okay.
there's in Google Ads, you've got a primary conversion event and you've got a secondary conversion event. So a primary conversion event is a sale. So you're saying, right, for every sale, I'm going to pay £10, or I'm happy for it to be, 100, 10 times ROAS, or whatever, however you've set the tool up. That's what the system's kind of being judged on, a win or a fail. But you can give it secondary data. So you might want people that have been viewed 5 or 6 pages, but you don't want to pay for that. You don't want to say, well, I'm prepared to pay £1 for people that view 5 or 6 pages. But you can say to the system, if someone views 5 or 6 pages, they're probably interested. So make it a secondary conversion event and use that to prime the algorithm to look and to find other people. And there's lots of things, there's clicking on phone numbers, there's viewing of
Right.
books, there's watching of videos. With Tag Manager, you can set almost anything you want to be a secondary conversion event. So that's a really great way of, because what Google wants you to spend as much money as possible on its
Right.
platform. So it's in its interest for you to be at a scale budget. And what it will generally be is one of two things: either it can't find more people like the people that are going to hit your target, so you need to give it more signals, which is where the secondary conversions events come in, or everyone who has seen it has seen your creative, and your creative starting to degrade now, and you need to start producing more creative options. So generally, that they're your two main options of how to scale when things are starting to plateau: is give the system more data to find more people, or give the system more creative to go out and use and refresh people. So yeah, that's generally the two options that you've got.
I like that. You don't hear a lot of people talking about the secondary actions, secondary conversions. Like,
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
not something that either a lot of people aren't doing it, or they're doing it and they're not talking about it. And I think that's a really, really powerful strategy. When you look at marketing from a broader perspective, I know you said that, you do meta ads as well. Like,
Yeah.
how can a marketer take what they're learning in PMax and use that to improve broader digital strategy?
Yeah, so we produce when we're running kind of big sets of A/B tests. What we will generally produce for our clients is a test by test breakdown. So generally, when we worked with a very large finance client that wanted to be the next PayPal, and they were spending, oh god, they were about 35 grand a day on Google, and about 35 grand, so £35,000 on
Mm-hmm.
Google and Meta a day. So we were hitting statistical significance of 95% in around 2.5 days. So that meant
Wow.
that for every 2.5 days, we were going to roll out a new ad copy, which was going to have a new testing hypothesis. So the hypothesis might be it was a B2B, similar to PayPal type product, that this character would have a higher conversion rate than this character and would have a hypothesis Y, would run an A/B test, and then you'd pick a winner, and we'd probably have 10 or 15 tests lined up. But the goal from that is we would produce a one-page PDF of a test and say, generally we found that it's like the old, if you put the price above something, it seems more expensive than having the price below an image. Kind of
Yeah.
little things like that. So if you're going to run offline press, or you're going to do something else, here are all the tests that we've run that will probably work in a similar way. That if you're going to, if you're a shop and you're going to do a spread in a paper, and you're going to put the price below the product, because that makes it look cheaper.
Interesting.
If you put it above, little things like that. So
Got
yeah,
it.
all that stuff, and the digital teams, client side, absolutely love that, being able to share that with their team members and say, well, here's some great stuff that you can take offline, or here's some great stuff that we work for a very large DIY franchise in the UK, and part of that was an SEO project actually. And what we would do is our keyword research would go back to the buyers, and the buyers would be going, well, we're going to buy sheds for next year.
Mm-hmm.
What search queries are people using for sheds? And they would come up with their buying strategy based on the organic visibility that was there, and what people were searching for. So there's a huge amount of data that people don't really use that can be flushed through a whole business, really.
Yeah, I like that you mentioned even taking that offline,
Yeah.
right? It's I think most marketers don't even think about that anymore, right?
Yeah, it still exists in some place offline. What is that?
A newspaper ad. I'm like, I haven't seen a newspaper in years. It's
No,
crazy.
no.
That's funny. So let's talk about scaling and balancing ROAS.
Yeah.
Because we all know that as you start to put more money into platform, ROAS typically starts to come down, especially if you're trying to prospect and find net new customers. So,
Yeah.
what are some of those best practices that you like to adhere to help get as close as possible to maintaining ROAS and or starting to improve that?
Yeah, so it's the first one is going back to data. It's giving the system good data, ideally giving it first party data that your competitors don't have. That's going to get you ahead of 90% of people on the system. Because it's an algorithm as well, you kind of need to play the algorithmic game. So if you are getting good results and you need to start scaling budgets, if you double the budget, the system goes, oh crap, and it will go back into learning and have a little bit of a panic.
Yep.
Generally, you're looking at don't increase budgets more than 20% in every 3 to 5 days as a rough kind of ballpark. But Black Friday and Cyber Monday was an interesting one this year because it's the first year really when everyone was PMax ready. But you're
Right.
kind of thinking, so we're going to get a huge spike over a weekend. How do you kind of tell the system to expect this and it to not learn from this weekend and apply it to the next weekend, which is, traditionally what
It
PMax
was
might do.
tricky. Yeah.
So it's, you're using seasonal adjustments. So within the PMax system, you can go in and say, well, we expect conversion rate to increase by 30% this weekend. So you can kind of pre-warn the system. And actually, we were running our PMax Black Friday campaign a week before the start of Black Friday on a very low budget to start it learning. And then we actually dropped our promotion into the PMax campaign once it was at full budget. So all we actually changed before Black Friday was a couple of headlines and a merchant promotion. Everything else was in there and firing. The seasonal adjustment kicked in on the Thursday night, and that got us through until Cyber Monday, where you have to rein it all back in and go, right, conversion rate's going to drop a bit, and tell the system what's going to happen next. So yeah, it was an interesting one this season, but we had a client do £2 million over the weekend,
Wow.
40% up on the year previously. So yeah, it's a nice challenge to have. But yeah, you're powering an algorithm. You're powering a system. You've got to always remember that the system needs the data to react. So yeah, that's kind of the things that we've found from running PMax.
That's awesome. So again, we've got a lot of folks here who may or may not have had a lot of experience with PMax. So what are maybe 2 or 3 of those mistakes that you see marketers make with PMax? And then how should they be sidestepping those, avoiding those?
Yeah, so the first thing is your primary conversion events. So it's going into conversions overview and just looking at what's defined as a primary event. And if it isn't a business objective, cut it out, because if it's view 5 pages, well, the system's going to go out and find you people and you're going to pay on a ROAS model for people that view 5 pages, which isn't what any business needs.
Yeah.
So it's getting that correct tracking set up, getting good conversion data into the system. So
data, we've heard it over and over again. Data.
It's all about it, and understand what that data is. If it's a revenue figure, is that revenue figure including the delivery, the tax? Is the ROAS including the delivery and the tax? Is that the right number to be using? Because that's what the system's going to be using. So if you don't understand the $5 data set that you give to it, it's going to make the wrong decision. It's kind of that simple. Too many assets, kind of going. If back in when we used to do A/B tests manually, we used to always aim for a 95% statistical significance, which means 95% of the time this will happen. It might mean that we won't know what will happen 95% of the time, but that's kind of how the number works. If you have got an algorithmic system that's trying to work out the best creative to use and you give it 100 options, well, it's going to have to do hundreds of tests, hundreds of times before it can work out what works and what doesn't work. So keep it simple. Change stuff in and out, but yeah, don't give it a whole load of data because it will go, right, well, I've got 100 different videos to test. I've got to test each one of them until I'm 95% happy that that one will work all the time. And that takes a shed load of sessions. You'll basically waste a whole load of cash
and money.
Testing. You don't, yeah, exactly. And then, look at the insight data the tool gives you back. Don't trust it 100%, but do look at that data that's in the platform. Look at the recommendations, and then just kind of use your common sense if it's going to be good for your business or if it's going to be good for Google's business, and then make the right decision on whether you should implement that or not.
Oh, good for your business or good for Google's business. That's another good quote right there.
Yeah.
Oh, I love it. Okay. This is my second favorite question of every interview. My first was getting to know you. My last is pull out the crystal ball. Like, where's PMax going next year? We're a couple of weeks away from 2025.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think it's all going to go further automated. I think we're going to see some interesting stuff coming up from AI. But the nice thing about digital is we're at the leading edge of it. So what we're seeing is, everything that's kind of we're seeing in other parts of the business, Google kind of led with. So the dynamic creative, the production of video assets, the creation of text assets, we've got all of that. We've had that for 6 months.
Yeah.
What we need to be doing is improving the data into the systems, which is
data.
Things like it's going to be data. It's going to be data and improvement of data, first-party data, data warehousing, data analysis, AI data interpretation. That's where the future is going to be because everyone's got the same tools now. Everyone can go in. We can have an intern go in, set up a PMax campaign. The same as a $100,000 PPC freelancer who's an expert. Same tools. But actually, what can that big performance campaign deliver that your smaller competitor can't? And it's your data. That's the most important asset that any business has now is your first-party data. And if you can record it, collect it, store it, do it because you will need it next year.
And it's vital for everything, even outside of PMax, for Meta. Your email SMS, like that is what helps an e-commerce business be able to learn and grow, especially when you can segment that data down, right? And get to your ideal highest value customers. Do you do much with that? Do you run campaigns specific to segments?
Yeah, absolutely. So we've got a cool tool that we've been playing with for about 2 or 3 months now. And we'll have a client come in and it pulls into a couple of different databases. We can use keys amongst databases to join that person up together. And they might come in and they do something in the first section, but by the end of the database, they've done something else. Yeah. We can then create similar audiences to the people that have done with our own first-party data and apply that out to the campaign. So yeah, and that's all done with AI now. So we can say it's it's a client that's a car buyer, and we can say, well, from the people that have bought this type of car, let's look at all the stuff and let's look at all the correlations of all the different data points before they became that buyer and find us those types of people. So yeah, it's using first-party data correlation within your own internal systems. And it's amazing what AI and data analysis can find. It really is incredible stuff that's happening now.
I think 2025 is going to be a fun year. I think it's going to be a stressful year trying to figure out all of this AI and how to use data properly. And I think the brands that really nail it are going to crush it next year. And the ones who struggle to figure it out are probably going to limp along. So data. That's the big takeaway, everyone. So make sure that you've got your data. Martin, outside of following you on LinkedIn, are you on X, the Twitter? Where can people, check you out and learn from you?
The best place is Martin McAndrew on LinkedIn. We've got Blue Thirst, and we post a regular every week an update of everything that's happening in digital. So it's all the stories the team here finds and go, oh, that's good to know. We distribute that every week, so you can sign that up through Blue Thirst LinkedIn page, and or connect to me on LinkedIn. More than happy to connect to anyone.
Cool. Well, we'll make sure to include those in the show notes, make it really easy for everyone to get in touch with you and follow you and be able to continue to learn from you. So thank you so much for being
Thank you for having me, mate. Really enjoyed it.
That was a great conversation, a great episode, and I know that we learned a lot. And so to our listeners, I hope that you've been able to pull a couple of really good nuggets of wisdom. Take those things, make a plan, and take massive action this year. Thank you, everyone, so much for joining.